Good morning. Today is March 17th, 2008. My name is Jeff Given. I'm a volunteer here at the Palm Springs Air Museum in Palm Springs, California. Part of our mission is to record and preserve the history of our country's military conflicts, especially World War II. As part of the Veterans History Project of the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., we conduct interviews of veterans and civilians who participated in these conflicts. Today I'm here at the museum with special guest Harvey McEWAN and our very special guest Betty McEWAN, who we're going to be discussing World War II with here today. Nice to have you here, Betty.
Nice to be here.
Can you start off by stating your full name and spell it for me, please?
My full name is Elizabeth McEWAN. Elizabeth, Elizabeth, McEwen, McEwen.
Can you share with us where you were born and raised?
I was born in London, England, in a place called Hampton Wick, Middlesex. And I was there when the war was declared in 1939,
Okay.
September. And my first memory of an air raid is when we were at church. And I was by myself, I wasn't with a family. And so when the sirens sounded, I just ran all the way home and was told I should have stayed in church. But anyway, nothing happened on that occasion.
Well, we'll come back to that here in just a little bit. What year was it that you were born? I know it's rude to ask a lady of this, but...
Well, I was born in 1930.
Okay.
In October.
And how big of a town was this?
Well, it's a part of Hampton Wick, Middlesex is a part of an outskirts of London.
Okay.
But I really can't tell you the population at that time because
Okay.
I think I was too young to get into things like that.
And what was your parents' names, your mother and father?
My mother was Elizabeth also, but she was Esther, my mother, and my father's was Benjamin Thomas Seal.
Okay. And do you know how they met?
Yes, because she was my stepmother.
Okay.
So my own mother died before I was a year of meningitis.
Okay.
And my father had my aunt look after me in Hastings, actually, until I was 3 when he remarried.
Okay.
And my real mother's name was Evelyn May Holmes.
Okay. Do you know much about your grandparents?
Not terribly much.
Okay.
Not too much. Just my dad's mother. She lived to be nearly 100.
Wow.
Which was wonderful. And the grandfather that I remember was her, I think, third husband, and he was a retired naval man. So I don't know. And they used to live in Penge in London, in Waterman's cottages, which were for retired naval personnel.
Okay. Do you remember the address that you were raised in? Okay.
Oh, the address I was raised was St. John's Road, but it doesn't exist anymore because during the bombing it was just obliterated.
Okay.
There's nothing left.
Can you describe the type of neighborhood it was?
Well, it was just a small, I mean, if you've ever been to England, the houses are all very tiny, very close together.
Okay.
And just an average little home.
Okay.
And that's the one that got bombed
Wow.
during the war.
And what did your father do for a living?
He was with the fire brigade. He was a head captain or whatever in the fire
Okay.
brigade at the station.
Did you have any brothers and sisters?
My father had 3 sisters,
Okay.
and now they're all passed on.
Did you have any brothers or sisters?
I only have a half-sister. When my father married again, they had a daughter. She was born, actually, New Year's Day, 1939.
Oh, mercy sake.
Yeah.
So what did you do for recreation at the time before the war started?
9 years old, go out to play, go to swing, go to the rec, and all kinds of things like that.
Okay. Was your family a religious family?
Not terribly. I used to have to go to church in the morning and church in the afternoon and slideshows on Wednesday
Okay.
at the church, because they used to have lantern slides.
Okay.
You see those?
And that was the Church of England?
Yes.
Okay. So how far was the church from your home?
Quite a walk. Quite a walk.
Okay.
Probably about 8 to 9 blocks anyway.
Okay. Tell me about the school you went to.
Well, I went to the infant school, Southwick, Sussex.
Okay.
And no, not that Southwick, Sussex, in London and Hampton Wick. And it was, I remember my really first day at school, because it was so different to have to sit and couldn't do anything at 5 years old. I used to be running around, but had to sit down and be told where to go, and you could only go to recess when you were told to go. So it was quite different from being at home.
Okay, so you started off by saying you were at church on September 1st,
Yes.
1939.
Yes.
And so
Well, I'm not sure if that's the day the war was declared,
okay.
because the first thing I remember was the siren and then being in church.
Had you been
And
told what that siren was?
Yes, yes. But they didn't tell me I shouldn't run home from church, but that's when it went. But I ran home and got reprimanded because you should have stayed in church.
So what was your feeling about it at the time that siren first went off? Do you remember what the
Scared.
Scared.
Very, very frightened.
Right.
And also by that time we'd all had been issued gas masks,
Okay.
and so everyone had to carry this little square cardboard box with a little gas mask in it.
Mm-hmm.
So we always had those with us. So take them to school and take them everywhere.
Do you remember if you saw planes or just heard them, or?
Oh no, I heard them and saw them, especially in London,
Mhm.
because we were there for the Blitz,
Okay.
and we got bombed out.
Your home.
Your
got
home
bombed.
got obliterated, and not terribly much injuries, but my sister was lost for a wee while. When they found her in between two armchairs pushed together, and she was in between them. We heard her crying.
Oh mercy.
So my dad decided to move us to the south coast.
Now, how long from the start of the war to when you moved to the south of the coast?
It was after the Blitz of London, so it was in the early 40s.
Okay.
I can't quite.
So you lived through the blitzing
Yes.
for a good almost year.
Yes, and we used to have to go down to the subway at night to sleep
Mm-hmm.
because of the bombing.
Would you go into the subway with some of the same people, and
Every night it was we all take our blankets and our things. And
so it was kind of like its own underground family down there.
yes.
So you were with the same people
Yes.
night after night
Yes,
after
we
night.
were all allotted to go to certain stations, wherever you lived.
Now, when your home was destroyed, were you in the subway at that time, or were you at home when the?
No, we were at home, and it was a siren, but we hadn't gone out, it was the daytime. And it was mostly the night that we went down in the subway.
Okay.
And we were very badly shaken up. The house was it wasn't livable.
Okay.
And so that's when my father decided to go and take the family to the south coast.
So were you able to get to a bomb shelter, or did the bombing just occur that destroyed your house?
But the siren had gone, and then they just started coming, boom, 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 boom.
Okay.
That was that.
So there wasn't time to get to
No,
the shelter.
No.
Was the whole block destroyed, or was it?
Well, the whole street now, it doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
And I guess after they got rid of the rubble, it wasn't rebuilt. It was named, I don't even think, it's not even named that anymore.
So what I'm asking though, the whole street at the time your house was destroyed,
Yes.
the whole street was
Yes.
destroyed at the same time.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
it wasn't just
A
your
lot
house.
of people were killed at the
Mm.
time.
So can you tell me about how day-to-day life was when you were still in London before you moved, and you would spend the nights down there?
Well,
How was it as far as, was food difficult to get?
Well, food was rationed,
Uh-huh.
and if you can imagine, we were allowed 1 egg a week a
Oh.
person, but it was like 2 ounces a week a person. Meat was so many ounces a week, so my mother used to save up the rations, and so we'd have a roast on Sunday, so that was good. And but other than that, you were just very careful and very cautious when you went out on the street, and actually to go to school was very scary.
So you continued going to school every day?
Yes, yeah, as long as we could.
Mm-hmm.
And then if the sirens would start before you leave the home, you never left. You didn't go to school that day. So schooling was iffy.
Okay.
You know.
Did the rationing begin right away, or did it take a while before it?
Well, it started, I think, right away because we were not getting any more boats coming from anywhere
Mm-hmm.
to supplying them with food. So it was more or less what we grew and what was that we had cattle and milk and I guess cheese, whatever was made in England.
It must have been terribly frightening as a young child to even just hear the planes, because you know
It
what's
was.
coming.
Oh, we knew when they would come over because they always had the funny droning sound,
Mm-hmm.
and then they dive bomb the streets, and they'd also machine gun the streets if you're on the streets. And I was telling Harvey's story, my husband, and that my mother had sent me out to get some milk. I don't know if it was for my sister or what. And I had to go to the corner little store and get some milk. And I had this little bottle of milk, and all that the siren had sounded while I was in the store. So the lady in the store said, "Oh, you should stay here." I said, "No, I got to get home with the milk." And while I'm running home through along the street, the sidewalk, a plane came over, and he was machine gunning, and there was a man on a bicycle, and he jumped off his bike and pushed me down on the pavement and by a bush, and but I still got the milk. I still took the milk home, and he had a broken arm, but he did save me.
Wow.
Yeah, and but I got my milk home. My mom.
And was your mom mad at you for running down the street, or did she?
I don't know, but I was scared I'd get told off for breaking the milk.
Yeah.
Or not taking the milk home. But I got the milk home,
Yeah.
all in one piece. And the gentleman that saved me became quite a friend and visited us regularly.
What an amazing story that one is.
So that was one.
Okay, so then you moved to the south of England.
Yes, we moved to Southwick, Sussex. My dad had a sister or cousin, I can't quite recall. I called her Auntie Daisy anyway. And so we moved into a house that was right on the beach. And it was like a storefront and 3 stories. And that's when, during the war, I'm probably skipping a bit there, but our back gate opened up onto the beach.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, we didn't know what was happening. We had a barbed wire put on the gate and a seal. And we were not allowed to go out that gate whatsoever to go to the beach because it was the entrance to Shoreham Harbour. And they closed all the streets off because where we lived was on the seaside.
Okay.
The main street it was called Albion Street, and it used to run all the way through from Worthing and right through to Brighton. And they had closed all the side streets off, and they were all wired, and they all had guards on them.
So they would patrol the beaches.
And so no one could get on that main street where we lived. But we were on the seaside, so we were okay. But to get the shopping, because all the stores were on this main street, we used to have to go out by the barriers, and the stores had to open the back doors. So you could only go shopping the back of the store. All the fronts were sealed. And then after a while, it was quiet for a while, but we still couldn't go out, couldn't, they told us not to look out of windows and not to do anything. And then one evening, there was an awful lot of noise outside, and they had soldiers by the hundreds, maybe thousands, and tanks, and we could hear them. And so that was the beginning, I think, of the raid of Dunkirk. And but I think it happened a couple of times before it actually the event took place.
Mm-hmm.
And also we used to go up to the 3rd floor bedroom window, and we could see, because they didn't tell us really that you really shouldn't look out that third bedroom window, and we could see all the barges
Right.
all lined up down at the beachfront in the harbor
So that's when they were pulling the troops.
to go over.
Okay.
And then we used to watch also the Spitfires and the Hurricanes go over, and we used to count them. My dad did. He used to count them, and when they went over, and then we'd hear them coming back, and there was always far less coming back than went over. And the big bombers, actually the Spitfires would do a victory roll, which they would roll over when they hit the coastline, and but the heavy bombers used to really labor to get back because they'd be all shut up, bits missing. Sometimes you could see holes right through them.
So they were all flying fairly low at this point.
Oh, very low, and they'd just come over the coastline very low, and we always hoped they'd make home okay. But probably some of them didn't land too good by the way they were shut up, and the bellies and tails and holes here and there. But it was very sad to see.
And did you still continue seeing the German planes coming over?
Oh yes.
Okay.
Yes, and also we had searchlights all along the beachfront, and the Americans that were there used to occupy. I don't know if they were there. I don't recall them being empty. Maybe they confiscated them. I don't know what they did, but they used these homes to house their military, and the garage was a cookhouse. So at that time, I used to deliver papers, and I used to always carry extra Daily Mirror, because the cookhouse guys used to say, "Have you got a Daily Mirror today to spare?" And I say, "Oh sure." And because I used to like reading the comic strip with Jane, because Jane was always in a state of undress, and they loved it. So, and then I used to get to know the cooks, and they'd say, "Oh, what would you like today?" So I'd say, "Oh, Mom says, have you got any peanut butter?" So out of my paper bag, I'd take a little jar, and they'd give me peanut butter. And sometimes I'd get jam, which is your preserves, and then I get gum, to give me a stick of gum, and sometimes a little bar of chocolate. So it was really,
Do you
they were
remember?
really kind to all the English people.
Do you remember what you were doing when December 7th, 1941 happened?
December 7th, 41. That was
That's when Pearl Harbor was bombed.
I know it was all in the papers, and I realized then that at that day was the time that we were really sinking. England was really going under at that time. So that's, I think, the best time that England had, when the Americans came over and helped us, because really without your help, we wouldn't be here today.
Do you remember the conversation your father might have had with somebody about that? I mean,
I can't remember too much about that, but I do remember we were all very joyful that you were going to come in and help us.
do you remember what it was like when all of a sudden all these thousands and thousands and thousands of American troops started arriving, and it just started crowding up? And
Oh, we had them everywhere.
uh-huh.
And of course, my father used to go to the Victory Pub, and it was just packed. and no, but they were always so good and kind. That's what I remember. And we were very pleased to have them there. Believe me.
And so you continued living in the same town through the whole duration?
Yes, we lived in Southwick right until the very end.
Okay.
And it was.
What was your father doing for work at this point?
Well, he was, at this point now, he was still working as a volunteer fireman, because we used to get bombs, strain bombs, and also when the V-2 rocket started to come over, they wouldn't quite make it to London, and when they stopped, they really come down, so we had lots of them come down on the coast.
Do you remember actually seeing those?
Oh, we used to watch them. And we used to watch them and pray, don't stop, because we knew directly they stopped, they'd be down.
Now you're talking about the
V-2
first
rocket.
the rockets, okay? Do you remember the buzz bombs as well?
Yes, and they would come quite low. I think they try to get over or underneath the radar. And but I do remember seeing the searchlights and the ack guns, because where the soldiers were billeted, the ack guns was right in front of them on the beach. And at night they'd get the searchlights going, and you'd see two go on a plane, and that's when they'd shoot it up.
Mm-hmm.
Another one down. So.
Would you get excited when they would get one?
Of course.
Of course. Okay.
Of course, it's either them or us.
Right.
So
right.
I mean, oh yes. It sounds kind of bad now, but then it was
a war.
Everyone for themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
I can't imagine how scary that would be as a young girl to sit there and watch a V2 or a V1
and also when they used to come over, we could hear them. They had different kind of sound than the Spitfires or the other ones, and it was just one of those things you knew it was the German. It was Jerry up there.
Did you ever see aerial dogfights?
Yes, and I've seen them come down in the ocean, and English Channel rather, and also on land. We had a lot come down on land.
And would you actually gather out to watch them and cheer them on?
And we used to. Oh yeah, and we used to go. We were told not to pick up shrapnel and all this stuff, but all the kids and boys all went and tried to collect bits of this and that and the other, and so everyone had a bit of souvenir of a German plane.
Would they collect the scrap metal to recycle it, do you think?
Oh, I'm sure they did.
Okay. So they didn't ask civilians to help with that?
No, but we just go and find odds and ends that were all over the place. And then, too, they used to send down landmines, and very often they'd get caught in a tree. And you'd go out in the morning and there would be a landmine sitting in the tree.
And what would you do? Report it to the officials?
Oh, the ARP and the air raid wardens and, of course, the Army personnel were looking out for those, but that's where they'd be, and I've often seen one up in a tree.
Do you remember anything about the D-Day invasions? Was there anything special going on in your area of the country at that point?
Yes, I think they did. They used the same harbor. It's called Shoreham Harbor, but the Shoreham Harbor was, the opening was in Shoreham, but in actual Southwick was the actual harbor.
Okay.
And, oh yes, they used that. And too, after, normally when all the soldiers and tanks and everything went, within hours there was ambulances lined up.
Do you remember gathering of all the personnel and the equipment? Did you get a feeling that something big was fixing?
Something, we all did. Everybody thought something because everyone was talking, but nobody knew what it was. Because when they bide by your gate and put a seal on it, and everyone, you couldn't even get to the stores in the front door. You had to go all the way out and around the back to go to the back of stores. And that was something different.
So that wasn't all the time, that was just leading up to...
No, that was leading up to the invasion.
Okay.
And, of course, before that, because England was really terrified, or my father was, that Hitler, if he hadn't have gone to Russia, we were all prepared for him to come across because he was so close. Because Folkestone is only a matter of miles from where he was. They could have come to England quite easily. And maybe if he had, I wouldn't be here today. And so I'm glad he turned his attention and he went to Russia, which was a turning point for England in that case.
Going back to the Normandy invasion, do you remember, like maybe the night before, a lot of planes going over and maybe getting the impression that this is maybe it?
Yeah, we knew something was going on because it was just non-stop, planes non-stop. And, of course, there were the troops outside because we could see them, lines, and couldn't even see how many they went on forever. And we weren't allowed out. We were told not to go out of the house at all.
And how long did that last that you couldn't go out of the house?
Maybe 24 hours or something like that.
So do you think that started the night before? Or?
I think it did. It could have been longer. And but we could hear them, and the tanks after they'd all gone. And because, you know, they chew up all the sidewalks, and they chewed up all the sidewalks and everything. But there's quite a lot of them. Yeah, a lot of troops. And but it was very quiet.
Did you start seeing ships coming back with injured? And
yes, they were coming back, ML barges. And too, we had a Lady B shipyards two right where we lived, and I think a lot of the ones that were damaged were getting repaired to do whatever trips they had to do.
Okay.
And yes, and that's why all the ambulances were lined up, military, and to pick up the injured and take them wherever. So it was quite sad.
Yeah,
Really
I
sad.
can imagine.
Yeah.
So do you remember what happened on VE Day? When Hitler, do you remember if when he killed himself and
Oh yeah, that
victory
was,
and all that?
Oh yes, I was 14 at that time, and because it was 45. No, I was 15, and I was allowed to go into the pub and have a drink. There you go, because everyone in the street was just dancing in the streets. It was just wonderful. Everyone was dancing, military and soldiers, everybody. And so my dad said, well, I guess you can come in and have a drink. So I had what was called a shandy, which was beer and ginger ale mixed. Quite nice, actually.
Mm-hmm. So that was your first
That
cocktail.
was my first cocktail.
What a thing to celebrate.
I know it, with the beer and ginger ale.
And
I drink that today.
wow, I'll have to try that.
You try it, yeah, it's called a shandy.
Huh.
A shandy in England. If you go to a pub, if you want a shandy, that's what you get.
Okay. So all this time you were still going to school, I take it?
Well, no, they took me out of school
Okay.
when I was about 13 and a half or before, because there was no one to work in the fields. And all the guys had gone in military, and so I went out and worked in the fields, and I used to have to pick strawberries, potatoes, 100-weight bag of potatoes, drag along, and beans and peas, and that to help on the land.
Okay.
And so I was taken out of school quite young.
And did you ever return back to school?
No.
Okay.
Unfortunately, no. But I did after the war get a very good job, because there was still not too many people. I became a projectionist
Wow.
in the cinema, and got to run it all by myself.
So how long after the surrender do you think it took for life to kind of return somewhat normal?
I don't think it did for a
You
long,
don't
long
think
time. When we left England in 1947 to emigrate to Canada, my family, it was still rationed. Everything was still exactly the same as it was in 45.
Is that partially what caused your family to make the decision to immigrate?
Well, yes, I think it was too. My dad wanted a better life for his two daughters, and it was time to go because...
What was he doing for a living at that point?
Well, he used to help, like I say, he was a volunteer fireman, and then he used to help the fishermen.
Okay.
Because he used to like to go fishing, so he helped the fishermen, and we lived a lot on the fish that the fishermen caught, because the rations were quite scarce. And also, another thing about the Americans on the boats, they used to, I think they were ML, I'm not sure what they were, but they used to have cooks on them anyway, and they used to throw over bully beef into the ocean. And my dad used to, the fisherman, go and hook up this beef, and he'd bring home a great big chunk. I'd never had corned beef before. And we'd wash it in the sink with the tap to get the salt water off. And boy, that was good. My first bully beef. So they were really good that way.
Uh-huh.
And so that was even the cooks on the boats. So we survived.
So what made your father, do you think, or your parents choose Canada?
Well, in actual fact, they had papers in for Australia or Canada, and whichever one came through first, that's where we landed. So we landed with the Canadian Immigration Office.
Okay.
And we went to London and filled in all the papers, and then on the 27th of November 1947 we sailed on the Aquitania, which was still geared up as a troop ship, and landed in Halifax.
Okay. And how long did you stay in Halifax?
Oh, just we got on a train,
Okay.
and we landed in Toronto.
Okay.
I lived in Toronto
For how long did you live in Toronto?
from 47 to 54.
Okay. And what made you choose Toronto, do you know?
I think it's something to do with my parents, but I don't know why.
Okay.
And I went down on Yonge Street to Lowe's Theatre and looking for a job. And they were advertising for a projectionist. So I went in and saw the manager, and he says, what can I do for you? And I said, well, I see you're advertising for a projectionist. And he says, oh. So he said, what were you working on? So I said, on a Cayley 12. And I told him how it was all hand arcs. There was nothing automatic in those days. And he said, I'd like to take you up to show you our projection room. So I went up to see it, and they had Cayley 21s, which was all automatic, and there was nothing really to do, just make sure you got the film in right. And then afterwards he told me this sad story. He said, well, I'd love to hire you. He said, but I can't because it's a men's union. So the little bit of knowledge I had, I couldn't use.
Mercy.
Yeah, and I would have loved to have done it because it was so easy over here, you know, to run a projection room.
So you were about 17 then at the time?
Yeah.
So what did you do then?
Well, the next thing I did, my stepmother and I, we went down to Sears as a department store, and we both worked at the department store.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad went and got a job at the Firestone factory, the other side of Toronto. And so we all were in working within a few weeks of landing.
Good, good. And what was your first impression of living in Toronto?
Oh, it was big. I've never seen such a big city.
Right.
And the big wide roads, big cars, and the street cars at that time had a pot-bellied fireplace in the middle of them because they were wooden. And it was quite interesting.
I imagine it's quite a shock coming from ration provisions to,
yes, to
the
eating
land
all
of
the
any...
food, yeah, and hot dogs and hamburgers, and I had my first banana split and thought I'd died and gone to heaven because we hadn't seen oranges or any fruit for years in England, and not until after the war.
So how long did you work at Sears?
I worked at Sears for a couple of years, I suppose.
Okay. Easy to make friends?
Oh yes, very easy. And they were very friendly because I remember when in 47 in England we still wear short skirts, and of course in 1947 at that time the long skirt had come in,
Right.
and there was me going around in little short skirts, and so one of the ladies I worked with, she felt kind of sorry for me because there was no way I could go out and buy a new wardrobe, and so she bought me this beautiful, she said she didn't want it, but it was almost new, beautiful blue long coat right down to the ground. So I felt quite warm in that because it was wintertime.
Well, I imagine you kind of impressed a lot of the young men with your British accent.
Well, I guess so. But I know when I had to get my paycheck, I was called, my number was 248. And we used to have to go down every week and get a pay envelope. So I used to go down and he'd say, number 248. He'd say, no. 248. He says, 248. So for me to get my paycheck, I used to have to say 248. He wouldn't let me say 48. So there you go. And it wasn't strawberries, it's strawberries, and not water, it's water. So I had to learn an awful lot of different words because they were saying pardon.
So, did you meet anybody special at that time, or did that come on later in life?
Well, I had a few boyfriends,
Mm-hmm.
but nothing very serious.
Okay.
And but then I did meet one,
Uh-huh.
my first husband, and I got married in 49.
In 49.
Yeah.
So you were fairly young then.
Yes, yeah.
Did you have any children?
Yes.
Okay.
I
And what are their names?
Three. I got Brian Douglas and Gary Thomas and Yvonne Elizabeth.
Okay. And what are they doing today?
Today, one son is in Saskatchewan and or Winnipeg, is it? Winnipeg, got it wrong. Brian's in Winnipeg. My son Gary is in Abbotsford. That's not far from where we live, and my daughter's in Fort Langley.
And what do they do for livings?
Both sons are retired already, and my daughter, they manage a farm which takes care of endangered species of animals.
Oh, how interesting.
Yes, and it's called Mountain View Farms
How
in
interesting.
Fort Langley. And so her husband travels all over to different zoos. And in actual fact, in San Diego, you have Sasha, the camel that was on their farm.
Oh, mercy.
So if we go to San Diego Zoo, we can go and see Sasha. But it kind of spits. So you have to be careful.
So did you live in Toronto then for most of your life?
No, I lived in Toronto until 54.
Okay.
And because I had one son born with asthma, and Gary was in hospital every 2 weeks, and the doctor said, "You're from England, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "Why don't you change the climate?" I said, "Well, I thought England would be bad, but it wasn't, because Gary now is completely, he hasn't had asthma for years and years."
Okay. So you moved back to
I
England?
moved, yeah, and my Canadian husband at that time moved with me, and he got a job at de Havilland's Aircraft. And but then in 1966, I came back to Canada. There's a long story there.
Okay.
And came back to Canada, and kind of got divorced.
Okay. So what was it like returning to England at that point? Had England recovered some?
No, they were still on some rationing in 1954, and we settled in Hastings, and we went to Hatfield, Hertfordshire, where he got the job with de Havilland's
Okay.
Aircraft. And at that time they were doing Blue Streak, I think. The Blue Streak, it was called Rocket. Blue
Okay.
Streak, something. And he worked on that.
Okay. So moving back to Canada, did you go to Toronto or did you go somewhere else?
No, we went to Edmonton.
Edmonton, okay. Now there's a very handsome man sitting behind me here. How did Harvey come into the picture?
Well, Harvey came
Harvey,
into-
would you like to join us?
Thank you.
Hi, hon. Well, Harvey came into the picture. I left Toronto because I'd been to Edmonton, went back to Toronto, and I had business there. And then my two sons and children moved out to BC, British
Okay.
Columbia. And so I thought it was time I moved out to British Columbia. So I moved out in 83, and I met Harvey in 84.
So where did you meet Harvey? There's got to be a good story there.
It was a blind date.
Oh, how
A blind
interesting.
date. It was Harvey's friend that Harvey has, and his friend's fiance, and I worked at the same store.
Okay.
In a shoe store.
Okay.
And she said, "Oh, Henry has a friend named Harvey that would like to meet you. Would you like to go on a blind date?" So I said, "Oh, okay." So
Had you seen her yet?
No.
No.
You'd never
No.
even seen her?
No.
And we met we was going to go to a singles dance in a hangar in Abbotsford. And so we met in the Fraser Valley Arms.
The airport bar.
In the airport bar. How about that? And I waited with Henry and Beth, and waited, and he was about a half hour late. Not good in my books. And so then in comes this tall guy with these cowboy boots, cowboy hat, right?
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
a drugstore cowboy.
He was a drugstore cowboy. And there's me all dressed up, little Miss Prim. And he sat down and we had a shad. I had something, I can't remember what it was, a white wine. And then we went to a singles dance all together. And then Harvey brought me home. And we just said goodnight, and that was it. And then went to work the next Monday, and so Beth said, "So, what did you think?" And I said, "It's okay." So on Thursday, the phone rang in the store. Beth said, "It's for you." I said, "For me?" And it was Harvey asking me out for dinner on the Saturday. And then, so every Saturday, we went for dinner. And then 2 years later, we got married.
That's right.
So you were pretty
And
well
86.
smitten first time,
Yeah.
Harvey?
Oh,
Were you
I
smitten?
I certainly was. Certainly was.
Yeah, so, and it worked out very well.
Good, good, good.
Very well. Yeah, we both have, you have 2 children, and I have 3, and everything's going well.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Were you in the military at all, Harvey, or?
No, I wasn't. I was I married an older woman. I was just a young guy, and I was born and raised in northern Alberta in Edmonton. But I do recall during the war, when I was a young guy, right in downtown Edmonton at Northwest Industries, they built the Anson bombers. They were twin-engine bombers right there, and a lady that slept on a cot in our basement, her name was Vi. She was also kind of a semi-maid in the place and cooked horrible corn soup for my brother and I. But she worked at Northwest Industries where they built the Anson bombers. And one day she brought home a big Canadian insignia that went on the side of the bombers, and my brother had an archery set, and she brought it home for him so that he could put it on some bales of hay and shoot arrows into that target.
Well, Betty, you led a very interesting life, and can you take a certain aspect of what you lived through during World War II and maybe apply it to what it did for you as an adult? Did it give you certain things?
It made me more cautious in life.
Okay.
Very much so. And it's made me be very thankful
Okay.
that I'm still here. Because I had a lot of friends at school that are not here. And a lot of family that aren't here.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it in a way, I would have liked to have been older so that I could have taken part in it
Mm-hmm.
instead of just seeing it. And that would have made me feel like I was doing more.
But even as a young child, you did quite a bit working in the fields.
Yeah. Yeah, we had to work in the fields, and I missed my schooling.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, I've learned a lot in life,
Mm-hmm.
and it's an experience that I guess I would do it again if I
Mhm.
had to. But I think we had a good prime minister too. Churchill was we'd do it, and we did.
He did a lot of radio announcements.
Yes, he
didn't
did, and he kept all the morale up for everybody.
And was it something you'd look forward to hearing?
Yes, we used to have the radio on every night and listen to all the news, and have to sit very quiet and while it was on. And he was a morale booster for everybody. But like I say, without you guys, the Americans, forces, men and women, I don't think I'd be here to do this interview today.
Well, we sure appreciate you being here, and we've
Thank you
enjoyed
for having
visiting.
me.
And on behalf of the Air Museum, thank you very much.
Thank you.
There we go.
Oh, I thought
She,
that was all
there
right.
was one other thing that she was going to mention. She told me last night, Jeff. She said,
My straps was
it was a
falling.
lot of fun sometimes. We used to go down to
Oh,
the
yeah.
Red
I
Triangle.
forgot the dancing thing, yeah.
The
Ah.
Red Triangle Hall.
Yeah, the soldiers had their own
And
orchestra.
they
Uh-huh.
American Orchestra was
And
the guys.
I used to go down and I could watch. And I used to love watching them doing the jitterbug and the jive. And full of the American soldiers and the English girls, just loved it. And but I used to be able to sit on the sidelines because I really wasn't old enough to get in with all that, But I used to love watching it. Yeah, they used to have their own orchestra. Play all the wonderful songs,
It's such a fascinating time,
Yeah, it is.
and
Yeah, it's a thing I could do it again, but
imagine that you look at what you lived through, and you would like to give current leaders today some serious advice.
we don't need any wars.
That's right.
We don't need wars. We don't. It just
doesn't solve anything.
It doesn't solve any. It doesn't. All it does is probably makes a lot of people rich.
Mhm.
And that's about the end of that one, right? With the ammunition and all that kind of thing. Because I know we used to go out without an awful lot.
Mm-hmm.
No fruit. Imagine no fruit for
And what
4 or
these
5 years. And
It's like a friend of mine works for the Veterans Administration here in the States, and he was an investigator. He's now changed jobs, but
right.
he says, looking at these kids coming back from Iraq today, he says they're far more messed up than the kids coming back from Vietnam were.
Oh,
Like they're going on their 3rd and 4th mission, and it's
Right.
such close, hand-to-hand, street-to-street, and up close and personal
It's
that
scary. It's bad.
their post-traumatic stress syndrome is just horrific.
Well, I never told you on the